Part 17. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 163. Mu Yangling directly carried all the wine in the cellar back, and put it directly in front of Qi Ziyuan. Let's see which jar has the strongest wine. Qi Ziyuan didn't ask why, he patted the kaifeng mud and drank it, and after tasting it, he picked out a jar of wine and gave it to Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling ran into the house, wiped his palms and feet with a soft cloth, and said to Bailey and the military doctor, "Come on, wipe his palms, feet, and armpits for him." Mu Yangling said. Sighing, "Now I can only treat a dead horse as a living horse, doctor." Qi Ziyuan opened the door and came in. Bailey was shocked and looked at Pang Kongqing. At this time, Qi Ziyuan couldn't care less. He went to the side and picked up a cloth strip to help wipe it. Fan Zijin also ran in. No one spoke in the room for a while, and everyone quietly helped Qi Heiran cool down. Mu Yangling ran to Hu's house to get the wine and came back. Although something unpleasant happened, it took less than 10 minutes before and after, but Qi Heiran's temperature seemed to rise again, and now he still had a cold kerchief on his forehead. Although Qi Ziyuan and others are still working hard, they don't have much hope. The military doctors don't know why they use wine to cool down. They only use wine to disinfect and prevent inflammation, but now he has nothing to do. Since Mu Yangling has found him, the wine is ready as he said. This side is getting busy, and the main room can't sleep anymore. Mu Shi also has a fever at this time, and he is lying on the Kong weakly. While taking care of him, Shu Wanyang looks outside worriedly, and his aunt is also sitting while in a daze. He finally glanced at the children lying on the Kong, and asked Mu Shi in a low voice, "If the little general, will the general blame us?" Mu Shi shook his head. The general is not a narrow-minded person. The aunt wiped her tears and said regretfully, "What a good boy the little general is." But Mu Shi thought of Qi Heiran's expression when he was standing in front of those children. He couldn't help but think of his daughter. He clenched his hands, got up and lifted the quilt, and said, "I'll go and have a look." Shu Wanyang pressed him down. "You were also making trouble in the past. You couldn't even stand upright. You should just sit and wait. There's Aling over there." Mu Shihong said with eyes, "Wanyang, you don't know how beastly that person is. Those children are only 7 or 8 years old, the youngest is only 5 or 6 years old, just a little bit older than Bowen. It's not enough for him to torment those children by himself. I got tired of playing and gave it to the people below. None of the children he chose came out alive. If it was Aling who met him at that time, then the one lying on the bed now. Let me go and have a look." Shu Wanyang was taken aback. She only knew that her husband went out with the little general as if he had offended a big man, so she escaped after being hunted down, but she didn't expect that man to be such a vicious person. Thinking of her daughter's behavior, thinking that Qi Heiran was only 3 years older than Aling, and he was a child himself, he couldn't help but let go of Mu Shi's hand, and Mu Shi got out of bed and walked out. At this time, the military doctor in the room was feeling Qi Heiran's temperature with a happy face, and finally asked Qi Ziyuan in a low voice with some uncertainty, "Do you think his face is not so red?" Mu Yangling turned his head to look at the hourglass, and said in a low voice, "It's been more than a quarter of an hour, and it should have some effect. Let Mr. Dede come over and have a look." Qi Ziyuan and Fan Zijin withdrew, and Mu Yangling helped Pang Kongqing over to give Qi Heiran a pulse. Blindfolded, Pang Kongqing felt his pulse, and it took him a long time to let go. After hesitating for a long time, the doctor's nature prevailed. "I need to see his face." Mu Yangling looked at Bailey. Bailey opened the door and went out. Qi Ziyuan entered the door, stood behind Pang Kongqing, and said in a deep voice, "Remove his blindfold." Pang Kongqing froze. Her eyes were tightly closed after the blindfold was removed. She didn't even dare to look at Qi Heiran, let alone look back at Qi Ziyuan. Qi Ziyuan laughed twice, and said in a gentle tone, "Don't worry, Mrs. Pangda, even if you see the face of your younger brother, I will never hurt you, but I hope Mrs. Pangda will be able to remember yesterday and tomorrow after leaving here tomorrow. Forget about tonight. Pang Kongqing nodded hurriedly. Don't worry, man, I won't remember anything when I wake up tomorrow morning. Mr. Dada, please open your eyes and take a good look at your younger brother. Pang Kongqing opened his eyes cautiously, glanced at Chi Heiran, and seeing that nothing unusual happened, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief, carefully looked at Chi Heiran's face, opened his mouth to look at the tongue coating, and opened his eyes. After a while looking at his pupils, he let go after he knew what was in his mind. Only then did he notice Chi Heiran's facial features. Pang Kongqing had never seen Chi Heiran before. When he first saw Chi Heiran, he felt like a sword, with clear facial features, and even some cute baby fat on his cheeks. Even if such a child is not so cute that everyone loves it, at least he is not. It would be annoying. Why is it a little bandit? Pang Kongqing shook his head in his heart, and without looking back, he looked directly at Chi Heiran and said, his condition has improved, and his body temperature is also slowly dropping. Although he was blindfolded all the time, he actually knew what happened in the room, and with the smell of wine in the room at this time, he naturally knew that they used wine to cool him down. Based on his pulse, he calculated in his heart, said, wipe him the wine again every quarter of an hour, and when the temperature drops a lot, wipe it again in 2/4 of an hour later. Seeing that he was so familiar with this, the military doctor was dissatisfied. Since you know that wine can cool down, why didn't you mention it before? Pang Kongqing was taken aback, and said, I don't know that wine can cool down. Didn't you know that after you used it? The military doctor suddenly didn't trust him. It was the first time he saw him. How did he know that he should be wiped every so long? However, Mu Yangling looked at Pang Kongqing with admiration. This person is indeed powerful. She turned her head and nodded slightly to Qi Ziyuan. Qi Ziyuan glanced at the military doctor, who immediately dared not ask any more questions. Qi Ziyuan was still standing behind Pang Kongqing, and said, thank you, Mrs. Pang, I will definitely repay you in the future. I will wrong you first tonight. I will send you back when my brother's fever subsides. Pang Kongqing gave a forced laugh, and let out a sigh of relief when he heard the sound of the person behind him closing the door after going out. The presence of that person was too strong, and Mu Yangling looked much cuter in comparison, even though he was she-threatened. Although Pang Kongqing had already seen Chi Heiran's face, Bailey still covered his eyes. Mu Yangling, Qi Ziyuan, and others wiped Chi Heiran twice more, and his temperature returned to normal, and his face was no longer flushed. Qi Ziyuan asked Pang Kongqing to check his pulse to confirm that he was out of danger, and fulfilled the agreement without hesitation, directly knocked him unconscious, sent him to the carriage, and sent him back in the carriage. Pang Kongqing woke up in the carriage, jumped off and saw the bustling streets, and in front of him was his own pharmacy. He suddenly felt that he was reborn after the catastrophe, and life was so wonderful. The shopkeeper came out to welcome him, and asked curiously, Boss, why did you come back so early? Didn't you say you went to the mountains to collect herbs? The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 164. Pang Kongqing stared at him. When did I say that I went to the mountains to collect medicine? Pang Kongqing was not ordinary resentment. He went to Mu's house for a doctor's visit and didn't come back all night. Why didn't his family know to look for it? The shopkeeper said in astonishment, Shunzi came to inform you yesterday that you had finished seeing the Mu family, and on the way back, you heard someone talking about some plants in the mountains, and you suspected that they were precious medicinal materials, so you went into the mountains. When you meet Shunzi, let Shunzi come back to notify you. Last night my wife blamed you for not bringing more people with you. This kind of thing is often done by the boss, so although his wife and he complain, they never worry. The boss is more timid than anyone else, and will never go to dangerous places. Why does it sound wrong at this time? Pang Kongqing did lower his face, and said, "Go and find out what happened to Shunzi." Pang Kongqing waved his hands and walked away, stopping halfway and said, "Since he said that I went up the mountain to collect herbs, then I will go up the mountain to collect herbs." That's right, everyone who asks will say the same in the future. The shopkeeper also looked serious, nodded in response, looked at the carriage beside him, and asked, "Master, then I'll ask someone to deliver this carriage to Qinli Automobile." Pang Kongqing almost fell down. He turned around and glared at him. "You said this horse is from Qinli Automobile? Isn't it from our family?" The shopkeeper was taken aback by him, and was even more baffled. He pointed to a mark on the carriage and the horse's buttocks and said, "Boss, this horse and the carriage are from a 1,000-mile dealership, and the marks are still here." With a bitter face, he said, "Boss, don't think about raising horses anymore, you should raise donkeys instead. Our family bought horses twice, and each time they were confiscated as soon as they were fat and strong. If we go down, our family's family business will be tossed away no matter how big it is. Because the Pang family has 2 pharmacies and has accumulated more than 100 years, the family wealth is quite rich, but the heads of the Pang family have been self-cultivated and upright, and they can be regarded as benevolent people. It's still early, but the wealth is far behind. In Pang Kongqing's generation, because Pang Kongqing's hobbies are a bit peculiar, he tossed his family's wealth faster. Fortunately, the Pang family was diligent and frugal, and they had always had income and wealth, so he didn't toss them all. But for the sake of the young masters below, the shopkeeper felt that he had to keep a close eye on his boss no matter what. Pang Kongqing didn't know what the shopkeeper was thinking, he just felt angry. He thought the horse and carriage belonged to those bandits. Since they brought him back in a carriage, they naturally belonged to him. Seeing that the horse was still considered a steed, he reluctantly forgave their domineering, but now Pang Kongqing decided not to forgive them forever. But Pang Kongqing didn't know that his performance at this time was completely noticed by others, so he turned around and reported to Qi Ziyuan. Because Qi Heiran was out of danger, Qi Ziyuan felt relaxed. At this moment, he chuckled lightly and said to Fan Zijian, "This Mr. Dada is interesting. Since he likes horses, we will find one for him later, and we will go hunting for horses later. Let me just tell Songji that the Pang family's horses will not be requisitioned, and the reason is ready-made. The Pang family has a good reputation in Mingshui County, and they have always been good at giving, so the court rewarded him. Cousin, you have already done him a great favor by helping him find out the thief of the Pang family. Why bother to help him buy horses? There are too many traces left, I'm afraid." Qi Ziyuan shook his head and educated him, "Zijin, you should not be completely confined to such mundane things in life. If you restrain your hands and feet because of fear, you will lose yourself. Although he was coerced by us, he also treated Heiran last night. He really did his best. Half of Heiran's escape from danger was due to him. We have to keep this kindness in our hearts." Although he knew that repaying his kindness would increase the chance of leaking this matter, Qi Ziyuan was meticulous in his work, but he never looked back, otherwise he would not have become a general at a young age. Mu Yangling was twisting the handkerchief to wipe Qi Heiran's body. Fan Zijian was thinking about what his cousin said just now. As he stepped in, when he looked up, he saw that Mu Yangling dragged Heiran naked, wearing only a pair of underpants. He jumped up in fright, ran up to cover him with a quilt, and shouted to Mu Yangling, "What are you doing?" Mu Yangling stared at him. "Wipe him, don't you see that he is sweating all over? The military doctor said that the sweat should be wiped dry with a towel, otherwise it will be another illness if it is inhaled." Fan Zijian blushed. "You can't wipe it off, you're a girl, so you're not shy." Mu Yangling rolled his eyes and said, "I'm only 10 years old, and Qi Heiran is only 13 years old. Your thoughts are really dirty. If you don't ask me to wipe it, then you can do it." Mu Yangling stuffed the towel into Fan Zijian's arms, got up and patted his buttocks, and was about to leave. When he walked halfway, he turned around and said, "By the way, when I was cooling him down last night, I just looked at him over and over again." "How did you do that? Don't stop." Fan Zijian pointed at Mu Yangling with trembling fingers, too angry to speak. Mu Yangling hummed proudly, opened the door and was about to go out. Outside the door was Qi Ziyuan's smiling face. The smile on Mu Yangling's face froze slightly, and he raised his hand to say, "Hello, General, come and see Qi Heiran." Qi Ziyuan nodded with a smile, stepped aside and said, "You have been busy all day and night, go and rest, and go to reassure your family." Mu Yangling nodded, and walked to the main room as steadily as possible. After entering the room and closing the door, he couldn't help sticking out his tongue. It seemed that it was not good for someone else's brother to say that he had seen his brother. Qi Ziyuan went into the room and took the towel from Fan Zijian's arms, and wiped Heiran's sweat carefully. The anger on Fan Zijian's face had been put away, and he said, "Cousin, it's better to send Heiran back to the camp, or send him back to the general's mansion, where can he recover well here?" Qi Ziyuan moved softly, and said after hearing the words, "Wait for another 2 days, when his wounds are scabbed, I will come to pick him up and take him home. I will call a lieutenant general to take over for the 5th Battalion. I haven't cleaned up yet." "He can't go back." Seeing Fan Zijian's unhappy face, he said, "The military camp is different from Pangkongqing. Pangkongqing has no communication with us. There are quite a few people on the eyeliner, from the imperial court, the Yamen, and even other generals. As long as they get some clues, they may touch the matter, so we have to be careful." Fan Zijian nodded. "So you stay here for the next 2 days, and try to find a way to run more this way. I'll have someone protect the Mu family, so you don't have to worry too much." Qi Ziyuan paused, and then said, "Also, I've called people prepare Heiran's double, and let the double stay in the barracks for these 2 days, making people think that Heiran has come back. When I come to pick up Heiran in 2 days, you and the double will leave the barracks, so you not only have to go here while running, we must ensure that the identity of the substitute is not discovered." Fan Zijian only thought for a while, then he had an idea in his mind, and nodded in response. Qi Ziyuan nodded slightly when he saw it. Although this cousin's heart is not as good as his brother's, his intelligence are beyond the reach of ordinary people. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 165. Qi Heiran took the medicine from Fan Zijian's hand with a bitter face, and poured it all up. As soon as he raised his head, Fan Zijian quickly stuffed a candy into his mouth. Qi Heiran smashed his mouth, and then he felt better. He looked outside, and Xiao Bowen and Xiaolan were lying at the door looking at him. He glanced around the yard and didn't see Mu Yangling and her big cousin, and asked, "Where's Mu Yangling?" "She went to drive her rabbit into the shed." Fan Zijian waved Xiaolan indifferently to take out the medicine bowl, and asked Qi Heiran, "Why are you looking for her?" "It's nothing, it's just that it's strange not seeing her after waking up." Qi Heiran's ears turned red. The two were so good that they could wear a pair of trousers. Fan Zijian stared blankly at his shy expression, and suddenly an idea popped up in his mind. Pointing at Qi Heiran, he asked, "Did you faint?" Qi Heiran's face turned red, and he distinguished, "Who said I'm not dizzy? It's just that I can still hear the movement. I always wanted to open my eyes, but I just couldn't. I was in a daze, feeling like I was floating." It's the same on the cloud. So although he was less awake, he heard many words, and naturally knew that Mu Yangling had stripped him clean in order to save him. Fan Zijian lowered his face, looked at Qi Heiran seriously and said, "Since you have a memory, save me from repeating it. You have caused a lot of trouble this time, and my eldest cousin has already decided not to go back to 5 until your injury is fully recovered. There will be a lot of fines and bans afterwards, so you'd better be mentally prepared. Chi-Heiran curled his lips indifferently. If you punish him, you will be punished. I'm not afraid. Even if it happens again, I will kill him. Chi-Heiran's eyes flashed a stern look when he said this. Fan Zijian sighed, didn't say much, but turned around and left. He came here on the grounds of seeing the rabbit, so he naturally had to go to the shed to take a look at it. Mu Yangling carried all the rabbits into the sheds, and put 100 rabbits in one shed, and now 2 sheds are full, and the third shed is also filled with 80 rabbits. Ziyuheng dragged the grass out and threw it in for them to eat. Seeing that their appetites were good, she smiled at Mu Yangling. Cousin, I think the rabbits will be ready for slaughter soon. Mu Yangling took a look and said, we can't always feed grass, but also feed some hay later. Do you want to buy hay too? Buy it, if some are the best sellers, if not, we will dry them ourselves. Mu Yangling looked back at the green pastures, nodded with satisfaction, and said, according to this momentum, we should be able to kill the rabbits in another 20 days. Let it out. But what if the rabbit is released and escapes? Ziyuheng looked at the 60 mu of land. Such a large land, if the rabbit made a hole to hide it, they would have nowhere to find it. That's right, we haven't bought nets yet and come back to stop them, so we should not release them for the time being. When we make money, we buy nets and come back to surround them and then release them. At that time, they will make holes if they like to make holes. Anyway, they are here in 6-10 acres of land can always be caught. Ziyuheng disagreed, but if they always dig holes and ruin the grass, what do they eat? Don't worry, I will train them not to dare to destroy the grass. The reason why Mu Yangling built this shed was to tame their wildness as much as possible, and wait until they became more docile before releasing them. Don't be afraid to tame them. Can't all rabbits like to dig holes instead of living in sheds? Fan Zijian walked over, poked his head to look at the rabbits in the house, and asked, how long will it take to get out of the first column? The rabbits in the mountains have been beaten up, and the first batch of rabbit meat will go south soon. Fan Zijian had already sent someone to find the woman who gave them the diced rabbit meat. At this time, she was arranged to help prepare the diced rabbit meat in the camp. The first batch of diced rabbit meat had already been made. Both Fan Zijian and Chi-Heiran thought it was very good. Eat, he plans to sell this thing in the dry goods store. The price is not cheap, and other older rabbit meat will be smoked and dried by him to make cured rabbit meat, and then go south with the caravan. Fan Zijian hoped that Mu Yangling's first slaughtered rabbit would be able to catch up with the first trip south. Mu Yangling thought for a while and said, let's go to another place. Kitchen Mountain is so big. You always hunt rabbits in this area. Of course you think the rabbits are gone. Go east, or go west. The difference between these two places, there must be a lot of rabbits. Mu Yangling thought for a while and then said, but you remember to tell them not to kill them all, and leave some small ones in the mountains, otherwise there will be no wild rabbits in the mountains next year. Fan Zijian evaded, Haoran is in charge of hunting, I can't command them. Mu Yangling gritted his teeth and went back to look for Chi-Heiran. Chi-Heiran carefully tossed the noodles and said, you really worry about people. You even worry about animals. He didn't care. Said, it's just a matter of one sentence, I'll just talk to them later. Chi-Heiran saw that he couldn't afford the noodles anymore, so he lifted his chin and said, isn't it convenient for you not to see me? Come and feed me quickly. Mu Yangling picked up the slim pinch and fed him. Chi-Heiran hated it too much for a while, and for being too hot for a while. Mu Yangling was so annoyed that he almost knocked the bowl on his face. He didn't settle down until Mu Yangling glared at him. Eat noodles honestly. Chi-Heiran peeked at her, and said in a low voice, I've heard about the Hu family, don't worry, I'll help you guys teach them a lesson when my master recovers. He got it off. Forget it, I agreed to him, and this matter has nothing to do with Uncle Hu. He is honest and close to my father, so don't make things difficult for him." Mu Yangling picked up a large chopstick of noodles for him, sighing, "My aunt said that Uncle Hu's life is not easy. The old man Hu and his wife are eccentric, and Aunt Hu is not unreasonable at home. I think it's good for him to be Zioki, at least he can be tough at home." Mu Yangling looked at Chi Heiran seriously and said, "I know it's wrong for me to agree to them privately, but when I agreed at the time, it was no different from what you agreed to, even if they didn't know that the wine was to save you. Let's not forget, otherwise we will retaliate against them instead of giving the original favor, and if someone finds out about it in the future, it will poke your spine." A flash of hostility flashed across Chi Heiran's face, and he snorted coldly, "It's just the most common sorghum wine. You gave a dozen tales of something that can usually be bought for a few hundred pennies, and you still want to be a Zioki, and you are a master. Is your little flag so worthless?" Mu Yangling tapped his forehead and said, "Okay, that's what saved your life. Your life is worth this amount, right?" Chi Heiran snorted coldly, "Master is priceless." "Yes, you are priceless, so why are you angry? Hurry up and eat noodles, then go to bed. Your elder brother should come to pick you up tomorrow afternoon. By the way, my father is not seriously injured. You give him more some fake chant, let him rest at home more." Chi Heiran agreed without thinking. Chi Heiran's face darkened when Mu Yangling left. He didn't have such a good temper as Mu Yangling. Even if Hu Man was pitiful, he would have to torment him with their Hu family, otherwise he would feel uncomfortable. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 166. Although Mu Shi's injuries were not as serious as Chi Heiran's, they were not serious. After the military doctor prescribed medicine for him, Mu Yangling took the medicine back to Shu Wanyang and asked Shu Wanyang to take care of him. Several children were also restrained at home, and the aunt finally breathed a sigh of relief after Chi Heiran left, patted her chest and went to the field with a hoe on her shoulder. People they met on the road greeted them one after another. "Auntie, how is sister-in-law Mu? I heard that Mrs. Dida of Rengzentang stayed at home for one night. Has Mu Zioki come back? Sister-in-law Mu usually seems to be in poor health, but she hasn't reached that point. Why is she seriously ill?" Malu said with a sullen face, "People have misfortunes and fortunes, who can say for sure? But my nephew's illness is much better, and Dida's husband recovered from his illness, and she was rescued that night. Now my nephew has taken a long vacation to take care of her at home. What about her?" Someone said enviously, "Sister-in-law Mu is really happy. She doesn't need to do farm work. Mu Zioki is even more painful when holding people in her hands. She has a daughter who is capable. She can plant all the land by herself. Gone." These words were not ordinary sour. My aunt snorted coldly in her heart, pulled Mu Yangling and Ziyu Hung away, and said in a choked voice, "People like my nephew are really hard to find, and my niece and granddaughter can be born by anyone. Yes, if you regret it, you can get another one while you are young." The face of the person who spoke sourly froze. Old man who walked slowly behind, already dissatisfied when he heard Mu Zioki's name, and now he was even more dissatisfied when he saw that Malayashi and Mu Yangling didn't refute. He walked 3 steps into, rushed he went up and said, "Aling, what you said that night really counts. Your father is no longer Zioki, so how can you still answer your aunt's words?" As soon as this remark came out, many people stopped to look over, and the fire of gossip was burning in their chests. Mu Yangling was taken aback for a moment. He didn't expect that old man who would stop her in the street to talk about this matter, so he couldn't help frowning. However, Malu was furious, pushed the old man who away, and cursed, "I have never seen you make trouble like this. The wine in your house is made of fairy water? Ah! Aling bought your 3 jars of wine. You just spent 17 taels of silver, and you are still unwilling to force her to let her father give up Zioki's position to your second child. Don't you know that it is a life-saving thing? Why are you so cruel? Thanks to me at the beginning he also told Aling that your family is in trouble, so he gave up the cow to your family envoy first. It is really ungrateful, ungrateful. The old man whose face turned red, and he shouted dissatisfiedly, that's what Aling said, what does it have to do with me? You can't say what the Mew family said like farting. The wine is from my family. It's been more than 50 years. Is it easy to save until now? Bah, Malayashi spat on his face, you're not afraid to flash your tongue, haven't you ever sold that wine? Ask the Fang's family in the village to find out, your jar of wine sold for several hundred yuan. Why do you need more than a dozen taels of silver and a small flag when you come to Aling? It's just because our Mew family is in a hurry to save their lives, and they are just getting into trouble, and they sit on the ground and raise the price. People like you, unless I am blind and legless, otherwise I will never have any contact with your family again. Auntie, Mew Yangling held her back. Malayashi shook off her hand, looked at old man who coldly and said, don't worry, our Mew family keeps our word, and my nephew doesn't pay attention to a small flag. I just hope that your second child can sit firmly position, Old man who pointed at Malayashi with a livid complexion, covered his chest and said, wretch, shrew, tears flashed in his eyes, but he couldn't help worrying. This disturbance made it even more difficult for the second child to establish his prestige in the village. Old man who felt regretful in his heart. He shouldn't have told Mew Yangling about this in the street in order to force Mew Yangling to admit it, but who knew that Malu's temper would be so strong? With a sinking face, Malu took the two children to the field, spat at the Hu family's field, and said to Ziyuheng, none of you are allowed to play with their children later, if I see, I break your legs. Ziyuheng shared the same hatred with her, Grandma, I will definitely not play with their children. Mew Yangling sighed, and said, Auntie, don't you still say that second aunt Hu is difficult? Why do you still bring this up? It will be even more difficult for second uncle Hu and second aunt Hu in the future. It's their fault. Didn't they benefit now? They didn't allow me to say it after they did this. When Malu saw the Hu family coming, she deliberately amplified her voice and shouted, I just want everyone to know, don't be a whore, you have to set up a memorial arch in the end. Mew Yangling tugged at her sleeve, and said in a low voice, but this matter has nothing to do with Ershu Hu and Aunt Hu. It was old man who brought up this matter. Malu's face froze, and then snorted, then they should too, who let them have such a father. Mew Yangling was speechless for a moment. The faces of the Hu family are very ugly. Hu Jinshi looked at the ground under his feet, thought of the villagers pointing along the way, and finally threw the hoe violently, turned around and left. Old man who was furious, and shouted, second brother, what are you doing? I'm going back to my mother's house. Dad, you are not afraid of being poked in the back. I am afraid. I and the head of the family are honest, and he and brother Mew have a very good relationship. Aren't you pushing us to death? Anyway, this Xiao Qi is wrong, whoever wants to be the one. It's against you, come back to me, come back to me. Seeing that Hu Jinshi didn't stop, old man who said angrily, go, go, if you dare to go, I will tell my second brother to divorce you. Hu Jinshi froze, stood for a while with red eyes, and then ran away. Hu Gui also dropped the hoe in his hand, dissatisfied, father, you should go and apologize to the Mew family. If you do this, we will not be able to behave in the village in the future. What do you bastard know? Old man who said, when your second brother becomes a small flag, these people will be under your control, no matter how dissatisfied they are, they dare not express it, or your second brother will say a word crush them to death. But our family's reputation has been ruined. I haven't said anything about marriage yet. Can he hold back the wood of the second brother? Why should the family sacrifice their reputation to fulfill him? I don't agree. The old man who became silent, and Hu Dian glared at Hu Gui, and said to his father, "Father, this matter is already like this, let's find a way to have a good relationship with the Mew family, regardless of whether the second brother will be this small flag, our family, and the Mew family can't make it too rigid." This time Miss Mew's mother is seriously ill, and General Chi came to greet her in person. "I heard that Miss Mew once rescued the little general and Mr. Fan, so the relationship between the two families is just right." "That's good, even if the second younger brother becomes a small flag, he will still live under the little general's hands." Hu Fangshi remained silent all this time, and at this moment he couldn't help saying, "Old man, let's forget about Zioki. Back then, I didn't allow you to make trouble. Now that we are so stiff with the Mew family, it won't do our family any good." Old man Hu saw that no one in his family supported him, so he squatted on the ground angrily, and said, "Who am I doing this for? It's not for you, but for our family. It's good now. You all blame me. Since you don't want to, then you can go make peace with the Mew family yourself, I don't care anyway." Hugoi's face was ugly. "Father, you made this mess, and now you just want to throw it to us." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 167. The Hu family broke up in the end. Mu Yangling didn't know about this, but she didn't expect the relationship between the two families to deteriorate like this. "But the most important thing is of course my own family. Anyway, the Hu family is also some irrelevant people. If it gets worse, it will get worse." Mu Yangling thought about it very much. But Mu Shi couldn't think about it. He had a good relationship with Hu Man, and he didn't seem to be against him just because of this, so he closed his eyes and said, "When I recover from my injury, I will go and tell the Hu family. This matter is your responsibility, you can't blame them for what you promised them." Mu Yangling muttered, "It was old man who was aggressive at the time, so I came up with this idea, and I didn't do it voluntarily." Mu Shi stared at his daughter and said, "Grandpa who is so much older than you, he is your elder, is it you who called old man who? What are you blaming her for?" Auntie protected Mu Yangling and said, "Is he what an elder should look like? Since he dares to do it, don't be afraid of people saying, 'I don't care about you and Hu Man.' In short, you and the Hu family are not allowed be soft, think our Mu family is easy to bully." Auntie, facing Maliu's stubbornness, Mu Shi felt a little headache, but there was nothing he could do. Xu Wanyang was sitting on a stool embroidering. At this time, she couldn't help but said, "Master, the Hu family has no one worthy of friendship except the second wife and husband. If you feel uncomfortable, just turn around and talk to the people in the village to show your attitude. In the military camp Li, as long as your relationship with Uncle Hu is good, why bother to repair the relationship between the Mu and Hu families?" Mu Shi didn't speak now, and Malu knew that he agreed when he saw this, so he snorted and pulled Mu Yangling out. When only the husband and wife were left in the house, Mu Shi gave her a bag of silver from the bundle he brought back. "You put these away for self-defense." Xu Wanyang was surprised, "How do you give me the money? It should be given to Aling." In the past, Mu Shi was in charge of the financial power of the Mu family. Later, when Mu Shi went to the military camp, it was his daughter who took care of it. Xu Wanyang never managed the family's money. Seeing that his wife didn't ask about the origin of the money, Mu Shi smiled slightly and said, "I'll give it to Aling too, but the child didn't spend the money. It's for you to keep. When the family has no money and needs it urgently, you take it out again. I am in the military camp, it is inconvenient to come and go, and I can't take care of many things at home." Mu Shi paused and asked, "We got this money after we killed someone, are you afraid?" Xu Wanyang took the purse from his hand, and said in a low voice, "You dare to kill people, what am I afraid of? Besides, didn't you say that person is a wicked person?" Mu Shi breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't want to hide what he did from his wife, but he told her because he was afraid of scaring her. He didn't worry about his daughter Mushi anymore. He gave another bag of silver to his daughter, and before he even told the origin of the money, the daughter opened the money bag and asked, "Is this a reward from the general, or should I kill that man? Someone robbed it." Both of them knew that the man was referring to Prince Wuben of the Kingdom of Jin. 3 black lines slid down Mushi's forehead, and he finally said, "It's for murder. This bag of silver is 68 taels, you collect it yourself, don't spend money recklessly these days." Mu Yangling tied up the money bag, and looked at his father with piercing eyes. "Dad, just wait, your daughter and I are doing a big thing, and I will definitely make a lot of money when I wait." "You mean raising rabbits, right? Dad only saw you throwing money into it, but didn't see you taking money home. Who told me that this was a no-cost business? Isn't that the rabbit hasn't grown up yet? Even if you grow up, this period is long enough. I forgot to ask you last time. I just found out today that the money will not be distributed until Mr. Fan's caravan returns from the south. The first column was given to Fan for nothing. Young master, do you think our family will be able to use the first batch of silver before next year?" Mu Yangling frowned, and said seriously, "Father, I know the cycle is a bit long. Before that, I could only go hunting in the mountains from time to subsidize my family, but there is no way to do it. The cycle of breeding and planting is already long. Daughter, I only know how to hunt. I want to make a lot of money easily, but how can my daughter have that ability? Even Fan Zijin has to run up and down to earn money, and has to organize a caravan to go south at his own expense. Can you? Making money is still unknown." Mushi frowned and looked at her, and his daughter said to him sincerely, "So Dad, if this business loses money, you can't beat me up." Mushi's hand hanging by his side started to itch, but he didn't raise it in the end. Mu Yangling jumped up early and ran away. She took the money bag back to her house, took out all the money, counted it, and finally hid the 60 taels. The rest of the money should be enough to maintain the family, plus the income from hunting every day. It is more than enough, so there is no need to worry about the food for the younger brother. Mushi wasn't the only one who got the money. Chi Heiran and Fei Bai, who came back, received no less money than him. It can be said that those who followed Chi Heiran to Hanshong Mansion found some money, but only he and Chi Heiran Fei Bai came back alive with the money, and Bailey, his duty is to guard Chi Heiran every step of the way. Even if everyone he was enthusiastic about distributing the money, but he stayed by Chi Heiran's side unmoved. They set up an ambush in the woods on the outskirts to attack the Prince of Jin. Of course, they didn't know that the young man in the fine clothes was the Prince of Jin. Chi Heiran simply hated the other party for robbing the children of the Han people, so he committed suicide like this: kill them all. He just went there with the idea of eliminating harm for the people. After killing someone, he naturally had to clean up the battlefield. The few people who followed Chi Heiran, except for Phoebe Mushi and Bailey, were all veterans from the battlefield. They were familiar with these things. They stripped off the clothes of the last few gorgeously dressed barbarians. At that time, they joked that these clothes can be exchanged for a lot of money. Mushi was still a little uncomfortable, but Chi Heiran was the quickest to get involved. He had no money for a long time. This time he sneaked to Hanshong Mansion and used Zijin's money. "This is all right, these people are so if you have money, you can pay off all the debts when you go back, and you can still have a lot of money left." Chi Heiran took the initiative to pick off the clothes of the most gorgeously dressed young man in the head, and that's how the seal of the Prince of Jin was discovered. Chi Heiran took the seal and knew he was in trouble at a glance. He didn't like reading, but he could read the characters on the seal. At that time, Chi Heiran only knew that people should not find out, at least not before they escaped from Hanshong Mansion. He also knew that these children would die if they went back. After weighing it, he was still reluctant to harm them, and directly sold these children to Ren Yazi to make the appearance that these children had nothing to do with them. Because this action delayed the escape time and revealed their whereabouts, they were chased so quickly. Chi Heiran didn't know that his actions not only saved those 20 children, but also hid himself. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 168. The kingdom of Jin was about to fall apart because of the death of the crown prince, especially the Hanshong mansion, which was still on alert. The prince of the kingdom of Jin was assassinated on the border of the kingdom of Jin, which made the emperor of the kingdom of Jin furious. In order to find out the truth, he sent the third prince Iriduo and the fourth prince Wuli over. Like the emperor, Iriduo and Wuli thought that the prince might have been assassinated by someone from another country before they came, but they couldn't help but hesitate after seeing the murder scene and the investigation documents. The scene of the murder was a mess. The prince and his guards were stripped of their valuables and even their clothes. This was obviously the rhythm of robbery. Explain. According to Hans Hongfuian's account, they were able to discover each other's whereabouts so quickly because they showed their whereabouts when they sold their children, so this is likely to be a murder case. The faces of the two princes were a little ugly. How could their prince die in the hands of the Han people like this? Fuyan peeked at them, and said in a low voice, "The prince never reveals his whereabouts when he travels. He didn't even know that His Highness was coming to Hanshong Mansion before he was dismissed from office. Those people probably didn't know either. Even the governor of Hanshong did not receive the news. How could people outside know? Moreover, according to the investigation, the prince came to Hanshong Mansion on a temporary basis. I heard that there was a talented and intelligent boy in the Zhou family in the suburbs. He ran over to snatch it while playing. The boys were all robbed." Fuyan also heard a little about the prince's special hobbies, but he didn't dare to reveal too much in front of the two princes, but the implication was very simple: it was probably a case of murder and robbery. But will the two princes admit it? Of course not. This is a great shame to Jinguo. The third prince waved his hands directly and said, "The death of the crown prince was caused by spies from other countries. You must find out the truth as soon as possible. Not everyone in our Dajin dynasty can be bullied. Today's revenge will definitely be avenged." Fuyan's mouth was full of bitterness, but he had no choice but to respond, but he was wondering if there was any change in Dezhou's side recently, and wondered if it could be pushed to Dezhou. But Dezhou has always been timid, and it is impossible for Dezhou's people to do this kind of thing. Fuyan scratched his ears and cheeks, and suddenly asked, "Princes, do you think those children?" He wiped his neck. Just as the third prince was about to nod, the fourth prince hurriedly stopped him and said, "No, we just separated the elder brother from this matter. If we deliberately killed those 20-odd children, I'm afraid we won't be able to hide it. Weren't they sold to? Are the teeth broken? Just tell the man to sell them away from the place." Fuyan sighed in his heart. It seemed that he failed to change the topic, and he could only find evidence to show that the prince was killed by spies from another country. Ren Yazi left Hanshong with the 20 or so children, but was bought directly by a group of people on the way. The man Yazi was originally threatened by the governor, and he had to sell the carload of people far away, which made him angry at this time. When they heard that the buyer was going to send these children to Dezhou's brothel, Chuguan, he naturally agreed. After entering the Great Zhou dynasty, the distance couldn't be farther away, so Fuyan wouldn't have any objections, would he? And these children are all handsome, and some even have beautiful faces. Ren Yazi is not surprised at all to be sold to such a place. After these children were sent to Qi Ziyuan, Qi Ziyuan turned to his younger brother and said, "Now can you recover from your injuries with peace of mind?" Qi Heiran lay on the bed clutching his chest, nodded repeatedly, "It's okay, brother. How are you going to arrange these children?" Qi Xiu glared at him, "How else can we arrange it? They are originally the people of the Great Zhou dynasty, the Han people, and they are considered good people there. Naturally, we should send them to schools or study or learn some crafts. After 10 or 8 years, after growing up, Jingguo gradually forgot about it, so I let them go home. Qi Heiran was completely relieved now. Brother, you are really a good person. Qi Ziyuan flicked his forehead and said, that's not what you said 2 days ago when you rolled all over the floor and asked me to save someone. Qi Heiran chuckled, and kept Qi Ziyuan flattered, saying, didn't my brother say something in anger? Okay, you go to recuperate, I'll send these children away. Seeing Qi Heiran leave, Qi Ziyuan's face darkened. Bailey came in from the outside, knelt on the ground and whispered, General, the Zhou family, the owner said that he is willing to drive for you. Qi Ziyuan sat in the chair, and said after a while, I have nothing to use him now, I just tell him that I have remembered his love for Dezhou, and I will take good care of his son. If he wants to, you can come and see him anytime. Yes, Bailey paused and said again, General, some of the families who got the news also have this intention, and some of them are willing to move back with their families and serve you as slaves for life. If they come back, they won't have that value. Qi Ziyuan took a sip of tea and said, and I don't want to ask for favors in return. If they have the ability to come, I will arrange their identities and let their families reunite. As for don't say anything about being a servant or a slave. Qi Ziyuan paused and said, you should also take a look at those houses, and if there are suitable seedlings, they will be selected and cultivated. Their identities are not flawed. In the kingdom of Jin anything is easy. Bailey understood the meaning of the general. He hoped that those people could become his eyeliner in the kingdom of Jin, but if they were not willing, the general would not force it. Bailey thought about it and came up with an idea, so he bowed down. Not long after, almost people crossed the border quietly and fled to Dazhu with their whole family. When they learned that they were Han people who escaped from Jin Kingdom, Wu Shanke and Songji were very concerned and arranged them in the village under their jurisdiction. And comforted them a bit, and filled in the way for them to go to household registration. Dezhou has always been kind to the Han people who are unable to escape, just hoping that those survivors can escape more. Is it the population anyway? If more people escape, taxes will increase, which is a political achievement for the prefects and prefects on the border. Qi Ziyuan sent the children of those families to them, while the children of the families who did not come were still raised by him. The servants of the Zhou family have been here a few times and saw that although their young master's life here is not as good as when he was at home, it is not bad compared to most people's lives, so he went back to report to the master respectfully. The head of the Zhou family has only this one son, and there are 5 daughters above, and 3 daughters below, but this is the only son. So when his son was robbed, he almost died. In fact, when Qi Ziyuan found him, he was not far from death. When he learned that his son was rescued and sent to Xingzhou Mansion, he came back to life instantly. He is also a citizen of the Great Zhou, so he naturally has a heart for the Great Zhou. In addition to this matter, he hates the barbarian even more. This time, the patriarch of the Zhou family directly sent his daughters to Xingzhou Mansion, and he took his wives and concubines to stay in Xingzhou. After entering Han's Hong Mansion, he will become Qi Ziyuan's eyeliner. Qi Ziyuan was very satisfied with this, and said to Zhang Ziyi Bailey, this person is trustworthy. Zhang Ziyi Bailey almost rolled his eyes. Of course it is believable. He sent all his sons and daughters here. It is already a posture of breaking the boat. Can it be believable? The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 169. Qi Heiran knew nothing about these things. Qi Ziyuan used an excuse to transfer him back to Xingzhou Mansion, where he was restrained to recuperate from his injuries. Within 2 days he got bored and could only keep calling Fei Bai to call Fan Zijin back. At first, Fan Zijin thought he had something urgent to do, so he left his business and hurried back, but found that he was just bored and wanted to talk to someone, so he rolled his eyes, but the person had already returned, and Fan Zijian stayed with him for a long time. Later, when Chi Heiran sent someone to call him again, Fan Zijian only came back 6 times out of 10 times, and most of the time was still spent on Wu Ying's business. Chi Heiran couldn't take it anymore, so he clamored to go back to the 5th Battalion. Chi Ziyuan was also annoyed by his tossing, so he waved for the lieutenant to come back and let him go, but strictly asked him not to leave the field for training until he recovered from his injury. Seeing that he didn't have to be locked up anymore, Chi Heiran agreed to whatever he said. Chi Heiran was injured so badly back then, Mu Yangling thought he would not be able to see him for more than half a year, who knew that he would come back in only a dozen days, although his movements were still not smooth, as long as he didn't pay special attention can't see it. Mu Yangling looked suspiciously at the place where his wound was. Chi Heiran waved his hand indifferently and said, "The wound has healed up long ago. If it wasn't for the elder brother who stopped me, I would have come back early." "How could it be so fast?" Mu Yangling looked at him suspiciously. "Mu Yangling is not an outsider," Chi Heiran said carelessly. "Master is very talented, healed from wounds since childhood faster than others." Fan Zijian glanced at him, and explained to Mu Yangling, "Heiran practices internal strength, and the wound heals faster than others." "Is that so? Internal force has this benefit?" Mu Yangling's heart moved, wondering if he should learn it too. Chi Heiran had already poked his head to look at Mu Yangling's rabbit, and asked, "So many people here today?" "The first batch of rabbits are out today, so everyone come and watch." Some of the rabbits that Fan Zijian sent were not small. He had raised them for 4 or 5 days in the camp, and Mu Yangling had raised them for nearly 20 days. They had grown enough to be slaughtered. The caravan has agreed to leave in 7 days, and now there are still 4 days to make the last batch of diced rabbit meat and cured rabbit meat, so Mu Yangling and Fan Zijian discussed it and decided to sell it. When Chi Heiran heard that he was going to catch rabbits from the shed, he immediately rolled up his sleeves excitedly. Fan Zijian wanted to stop him. "Don't mess around." Although those rabbits were locked in the shed, their wildness remained the same. "That's not the case. It's easy to catch. Chi Heiran still has injuries on his body, and the wounds can burst open if he moves a bit more." It's just that Fan Zijian couldn't stop Chi Heiran. When Mu Yangling saw it, he stretched out a hand and pressed it on his shoulder. Chi Heiran couldn't move immediately. Mu Yangling said with a calm face, "If you want to mess around, don't come here. I can't spare you if you trouble me." Chi Heiran had no choice but to hold back his temper and stand outside to watch the battle. Ziyuheng climbed in with those soldiers. Those men were going to catch the adult rabbits, while Ziyuheng was going to appease the young rabbits. Chi Heiran saw that Ziyuheng was doing well, so he raised his chin and said, "Your cousin is quite capable. It seems like you take her with you wherever you go." Mu Yangling said proudly, "Of course my cousin can do it." Chi Heiran turned left and right, saw Xiao Bowen and Xiaolan standing outside handing tender grass to Ziyuheng, and asked, "Didn't you say that Bowen is going to go to school in spring? Why don't you go?" "Classes will start tomorrow," Mu Yangling said nonchalantly. "Tomorrow I will take him to the academy to meet Mr." After Mu Yangling finished speaking, he had no time to chat with him. He stepped forward to help put the rabbits into the basket that Fan Zijian brought, and then counted and recorded the number. Fan Zijian also stepped forward, picking out a few unqualified ones and throwing them into the basket from time to time shed. After some tossing, the first batch of rabbits to be slaughtered was 238, not many, but Mu Yangling was very satisfied. She said to Fan Zijian, "The next batch of rabbits should have 3 or 4 rabbits from this batch times." Fan Zijian nodded, "You'd better find a way to raise the seedlings. In another 10 days, they may not be able to send you suitable baby rabbits." This shows that the rabbit plague on the mountain has eased. The corners of Mu Yangling's mouth turned up slightly, and he nodded in response. This batch of rabbits was quickly sent to the 5th Battalion. For the convenience of Fan Zijian, Chi Heiran allocated the southwest area of the camp to him. Everyone knew that this area was used to accommodate disabled soldiers and veterans, and the work they did might be their future military rations, so the soldiers in the camp were not dissatisfied. Even the 2 regiment trainers and the 4 battalion chiefs also acquiesced to Chi Heiran's actions. But after seeing the scale here, the 2 regiment trainers became excited again. They just counted the number of hares sent to the door every day, and they were amazed. Even if the rabbit meat is worthless, it is sold cheap going out, that is also a big income. So the 2 regiment trainers have been making a lot of noise recently, and they want to take over this area from Fan Zijian. The lieutenant general sent by Chi Ziyuan before was only acquainted with each other. Quiet. Fan Zijian pretended not to know what happened before, and didn't tell Chi Heiran, but invited Mu Yangling to visit their workshop. Mu Yangling really didn't go to see it, so she asked Ziyuheng to take Bowen and Ziyulan back and then went to Xieying with the 2 of them. Fan Zijian's workshop is divided into 4 parts, one is in charge of slaughtering rabbits, the other is in charge of processing the selected tender rabbits into diced rabbit meat, the other is in charge of processing the remaining rabbits into cured rabbit meat, and the other is tanning rabbit fur. Mu Yangling picked up a piece of diced rabbit meat and took a light bite. The diced meat was so soft that it was easily bitten off. The strong smell of meat permeated the mouth and tongue. Mu Yangling smashed it and ate it up, picked another piece and stuffed it into his mouth, nodded to Fan Zijian and said, "This food is indeed delicious, but have you thought about how to keep it?" "Naturally, I've thought about it." Fan Zijian took Mu Yangling over to look, and there were already a lot of earthen jars in the warehouse. These are clay jars, and they will be sold to dry goods stores after they are sent to the south, and they will open them for retail. He led the 2 of them to the other side, but there were exquisite porcelain jars on this side, some were round blue and white porcelain, some were slender and moist long bottles. Fan Zijian picked up a bottle at random, uncorked the bottle, and poured out a grain of rabbit. "Pass the diced meat to Mu Yangling, try it and see the difference." Mu Yangling took a bite, chewed for a while and said, "It's more fragrant and more delicate." Chi Heiran stretched out his hand to grab it. "Let me try it." Fan Zijian patted his hand off. "You are still sick, you are not allowed to eat these things." He turned his head and nodded to Mu Yangling and said, "I specially asked someone to make this, it is better than that batch, and it will not be eaten by then. Take it apart and sell it directly into cans and bottles." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 170. Mu Yangling touched the porcelain carefully and asked, "Isn't the cost low?" "Fortunately, the price is also not low, so the profit is considerable." Fan Zijian turned around and picked up another can, raised his hand and said, "The premise is that it can be sold." Mu Yangling pondered, and said, "It would be great if there was a bag that was waterproof and kept high quality." Fan Zijian didn't take it seriously. Such bags only exist in imagination, and the paper is still not cheap, so it's better to use porcelain. This kind of porcelain looks exquisite, but in fact it is still incomparable with several exquisite porcelain kilns in the south, and the cost is not high. Not as high as Mu Yangling imagined. Chi Heiran asked curiously, "What kind of bag is so good?" "Paper and cloth are not waterproof. Could it be oiled paper and oiled cloth?" "But the black one is not exquisite at all. Who would buy it?" Mu Yangling gave a brief description and said, "At that time, we can engrave little white rabbits and trademark patterns on the bags. They are very exquisite. Of course, it is not certain whether they can be made." Fan Zijian pondered, nodded, and said, "You're right, we should have our own trademark and pattern, so that people will know that this thing belongs to us at a glance." Mu Yangling said with some lack of confidence, "I'm talking about bags." Chi Heiran was instantly averted, and shouted, "I'll take care of the name." Fan Zijian glanced at him and said, "Okay, I'll leave this to you, and I'll trouble you with the pattern." Chi Heiran patted his chest in response, drooling as he looked at the bottles and cans. Zaijian, give me some, my wounds are healed, it doesn't matter if I eat a little, I will definitely not tell my brother. No. Fan Zaijian went out and brought a jar to Mu Yangling, and said, this is for you, take it back and taste it. Qi Heiran instantly became jealous, why is Fan Zaijian so courteous to Mu Yangling? His eyes swept over the two of them. Seeing that Mu Yangling accepted it unceremoniously, he was even more unhappy. Fan Zaijian only thought that his brother was angry because he didn't eat the diced rabbit meat, so he didn't think much about it. Mu Yangling obviously thought so too. Before he left, he patted him on the shoulder and said, when your injury heals, Mr. Fan will eat as much as you want. Qi Heiran said displeasedly, when did you get so close with Zaijian? Calling me is just a name and surname, but calling him is so polite. Mu Yangling opened his mouth slightly and said, all right then, little general, I'll call you that from now on. If you're okay, little girl, I'll leave first. Qi Heiran looked at her anxiously, are you angry? Mu Yangling laughed out loud, why am I so angry? It's fine, come to my house when you recover from your injury, and I'll ask my mother to cook something delicious for you. Qi Heiran's mood immediately improved, you said that. Mu Yangling nodded, and went back with the jar in his arms. It was the first time for the children to eat this kind of diced rabbit meat, and they all thought it was delicious, even the ant and Shu Wanyang couldn't help eating two more. But Mu Yangling didn't give more food to the children, saying, there are a lot of spices in this food. If you eat it, you can only eat 4 grains a day, and the blog post will be halved. Bowen pursed his mouth, but he also knew that his sister was doing it for his own good, so he picked up the last one and stuffed it into his mouth, chewing non-stop with puffed cheeks. Sitting on the con, Bosi and Kijia saw that the saliva kept flowing out, and stretched out their hands to reach for the jar. Mu Yangling quickly put the things away and hid them, and smiled to the two little ones, you are still young, you can't eat this thing yet. Bosi clenched his fist and stuffed it into his hand, looking at his sister with tears in his eyes, while Kijia yelled angrily, and kept grabbing Mu Yangling with his hands. Mu Yangling laughed loudly, picked up Kijia and threw it up, and said with a smile, you little girl, why are you more fierce than your brother? Shu Wanyang pursed her lips and smiled, looked at the eldest daughter, then at the younger daughter, and said, the girls in our family all have this temper, but the boy is gentle. Your tempers should be reversed. I think girls have a good temper, the aunt said, otherwise, if they are gentle, they won't sue if they are bullied in the future. Boys are better if they are gentle, so they won't get into trouble when they go out, and they will be more tolerant of everything, and they will be safe and smooth. Since my aunt says it's good, then it's good. You are an old man, and you are more knowledgeable than us. The aunt smiled satisfied when she heard the words, looked at Ziyuheng and Xiaolan, and sighed, I don't worry about Ziyuheng, don't look at this child who is usually like a gourd, with a sharp mouth and ideas, she will not. I wronged myself, but Xiaolan, this child is too soft-tempered. The aunt patted Shu Wanyang's hand and said, not everyone has your good luck, it's not a good thing for girls to be soft-tempered. Malu has been strong all her life, she knows that this world cannibalizes people, women are already in a disadvantaged position, if they are soft-tempered, they will be bullied to the head. Shu Wanyang's face was reddish, she lowered her head and said nothing. When the aunt went out, she got up and took out a basket from the inner room, handed it to Mu Yangling and said, this is a gift I prepared for Mr. Academy, take it with you when you bring Bowen tomorrow, and tell Mr. Talk. Mu Yangling nodded. Shu Wanyang called Bowen over again, and said seriously, it's not easy for you to go to school at home. In school, you have to study hard and don't fight fiercely. But if someone bullies you, don't swallow your anger. You are a scholar, so you should have the bearing of a scholar, do you understand? Mu Bowen responded seriously, Mother, I understand. Only then did Shu Wanyang nod in satisfaction, and after saying some words of encouragement, She took out the skull bag that Aling had sewed by herself. This is what your sister told me to make for you. You turn around and take your own books and pencil case, just put it in and carry it to school every day. Mu Bowen took the skull bag in surprise and gave his sister a big smile. Mu Yangling couldn't help but rubbed his hair. Early the next morning, Mu Yangling changed into neat and clean clothes and took Bowen's hand to go to the county town. Because her aunt was going to set up a stall to sell rabbits, she also wanted to go with them with a basket on her back. "Auntie, let me do it." Mu Yangling wanted to take her pannier. The aunt blocked her hand and said, "Don't, you just changed into clean clothes. If you get dirty again, it will be a waste of time. Let's go, it's just a basket, isn't my aunt carrying it into the city every day?" Mu Yangling was busy with the work in the field, so my aunt officially took over the work of going to the city to set up a stall to sell prey. She went to the city every day to catch the morning market. When they arrived at the gate of the city, there were already people queuing up to enter the city one after another. Most of them, like Malu, were there for the morning market. When Mu Yangling brought Bowen to the gate of the academy, there were already many parents and students waiting at the gate. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 171. Although it is still early for the academy to open, many people will come early to wait for it based on the principle of respecting teachers. Mu Yangling also wanted to leave a good impression on Mr. Bowen, so he brought him here early, but he was not the first one. Mingxi Academy is not big, there are only two gentlemen, one surnamed Lu and the other surnamed Qin. The two gentlemen are classmates and friends. After being admitted as a scholar, they jointly funded the establishment of this academy. Take some for home use. Mingxi Academy can only teach up to 50 students, which was agreed at the very beginning. When the time came, the two gentlemen opened the gate and said to everyone, "The students of the Enlightenment School stand to the right, and the students of the previous year stand to the left." Mu Yangling hurriedly pulled Bowen to stand on the right side. The two gentlemen saw the students who had separated and nodded slightly. Mr. Lu walked over with a smile and said, "I am your Mr. Kaiming. Now you come in with me to sign up." In fact, I had already signed up to make friends with Shuxiu long before the beginning of spring, and this time I was just a student who confirmed the report. Parents are not allowed to enter the classroom, so Mr. Lu set up a table at the door. Parents line up with their children, first report the names of the students, and then their own, and then give the things to the teacher, inevitably telling the children despite the education, beating or scolding is all at the discretion of the husband. When it was Mu Yangling's turn, Mu Yangling also put the basket at Mr. Liu's feet, brought Bowen to him, and bowed slightly to say hello to Mr. Liu. "Mr. Liu, my brother is weak, please take care of him 1 or 2. This is the first one to ask him to take care of the students." Mr. Liu raised his head and smiled when he saw Mu Yangling. He had an impression of this child. In other families, the father or elder brother brought the students to sign up, but this Mu family is the elder sister. I brought it here, and it is said that it was because my father was in the army, my mother was weak, and I had younger siblings to take care of, so I couldn't get out. He looked at Mu Bowen carefully, and found that he was indeed younger than children of the same age, and his face was not rosy enough, so he nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will pay attention to it. You can go back first." Then he turned to Mu Bo and said, "You go to the classroom and wait, first find a good place to sit down." "Thank you, Sir." Mu Yangling pulled Bowen aside, patted his head and said softly, "Did you remember what my sister told you in the past?" Bowen nodded fiercely, "I remember everything." Bowen looked at the classroom with excitement on his face. It was the first time he left his sister's side to play with so many strange children when he grew up. Seeing that he was not afraid, Mu Yangling felt relieved, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Then go in quickly, listen to the teacher, don't bully your classmates, and don't be bullied." Bowen nodded, and ran into the classroom excitedly with his school bag on his back. Mu Yangling stood outside and watched for a while, because parents were not allowed to stay in the academy, so she reluctantly went back. The aunt was worried, and when the sale was halfway through, she handed over the stall to acquaintances who knew her and ran over to take a look. When Mu Yangling saw it, she smiled and said, "Auntie, you should go back quickly, Bowen has already entered school." The aunt looked at it for a while, and asked, "Is the sir easy to talk to?" "Mr. Liu is very gentle." Mu Yangling chose this academy at the beginning because he had found out what the two gentlemen were like, and said, "Don't worry, Auntie, will you know if you go back to the blog post at night?" The aunt thought about it too, and waved her hand, "Then I'm going back to set up a stall, so you should go back quickly. Didn't you say you want to mend the corn seedlings? Go quickly, I will go to the field to find you after I go back." Malayashi still doesn't understand where Aling's method of corn comes from, but he has listened to her before, so naturally he can only listen to her later. After 20 days, all the corn in the field has grown. In some pits, none have grown, and in some pits, 4 or 3 have grown. From this, it can be seen that they were accidentally planted when they were planted. Too much. But looking around now, it turns out that there are many more things that haven't grown than those that have grown. Mu Yangling felt that the emergence rate was so low, firstly because the seeds were not good, secondly because there was no fertilizer, and thirdly because the plow was not good enough. After all, this is nearly 30 acres of land. Mu Yangling only plowed it once, and the mud is still in large pieces. The land is not very good, and the corn naturally does not grow very well. So what Mu Yangling has to do now is to dig out the pits with long seedlings and fill the pits that don't grow seedlings. Mu Yangling handed a 2-foot-long sharp bamboo stick to Ziyuheng and Xiaolin, and said, "Use this to dig, be careful when digging, try not to hurt the roots, and plant the seedlings in the nearest pit that's fine. Remember, choose the small ones, the bad ones, keep the big ones, and keep the good ones in the original pit, understand?" Ziyuheng and Xiaolin nodded repeatedly. The two children searched for a long time, and it was best to say, 3 trees and 4 trees are so rare, cousin, can you dig too? Mu Yangling hesitated for a moment and said, "Just dig those that are closer. It doesn't matter if there are not enough. There are still corn seeds left at home. We will use the seeds to make up later." Simply supplementing the seeds may not grow well, so this time Mu Yangling directly added some fertilizer, mixed some cow dung with the plant ash in the stove, and dug and dropped a little fertilizer before planting, so that even if this batch grows later, the growth will not be too bad than the previous ones. Mu Yangling and the others worked hard on the 28 mu of land for 4 days before they finished it. After finishing all this, Mu Yangling deliberately went around to the east to see her rabbits and crop fields. When she got closer, she found that her house had just been planted. The rice was bitten by something. Mu Yangling spread his legs and ran over. The gnawed land was close to the river. Mu Yangling ran over to take a look, and found that there was about a part of the land that had been ruined. Mu Yangling was so angry that he saw the cow's footprints by the river in the field without even wandering around. Yangling gritted his teeth, turned around and ran back to the village. Seeing Mu Yangling's gloomy face, the aunt asked, "What's the matter? Is there something wrong with the rabbit? What can the rabbit do? Those are the little generals and Mr. Fan's rabbits. Even God dare not treat those rabbits badly." Furious, Mu Yangling asked, "Auntie, who is herding the cows in our village?" The aunt saw that she looked like she had eaten a firecracker, so she said in a daze, "Who else can be? Hu Man has become a small flag, and the cattle will naturally be allocated to the Hu family. Isn't it going to start ridges for wheat recently? The cows are all in their house." Mu Yangling turned around and ran to Hu's house. Seeing that the door of his house was closed, he kicked it open and shouted, "Come out today, the cattle herder." The door slammed against the wall violently and made a loud noise. The daughters-in-law of the Hu family who were preparing to eat in the kitchen were taken aback. When Hu Fang ran out and saw that it was Mu Yangling, he immediately smiled mischievously, "It's Aling, come here, what's the matter?" Old man Hu came out with a sullen face and looked at Mu Yangling gloomily. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 172. Mu Yangling looked directly at Old Man Hu. "All the cows in the banner are at your house." Hu Fang was a little embarrassed when he heard the words. Mu Shi was very fair when he was Zioki. Facing the menacing Mu Yangling, she couldn't help but answer, nodded and said, "Yes, Aling, do you want to use it? Then I will ask your uncle to send it to you tomorrow." "No, I'm just here to ask, who is going out to herd cattle today?" Hu Dian's son, Huan, carefully hid behind Hu Zhang, not daring to show his head. He was looking for his uncle with his eyes wide open. Hu Gui had already turned back to the house when Mu Yangling questioned him. "What's the matter?" Hu Zhang stepped forward with a smile, took Mu Yangling's hand and said, "Aling, if you have something to say, speak slowly, your grandma Hu is old, but she can't stand being scared." Mu Yangling sneered, "Grandma Hu can't stand being scared, can my aunt be able to stand it? The seedlings I planted less than 10 days ago were eaten by cows. The crops in the field are the lifeblood of farmers. It's not like you don't know, who went out to herd the cows today." As soon as the words came out, everyone's expressions changed drastically. Old man Hu didn't care about his ugly face, so he stretched out his hand to grab his grandson's ear, and asked, "Let me ask you, did you herd the cows to eat the crops?" Wan yelled in panic, I don't. But the old man Hu didn't listen to his explanation. He picked up the stick and wanted to beat him. Mu Yangling stopped him, pulled Wan behind him, and said, "You don't need to rush to find a scapegoat, it's really Wan who did it, I'll do it too. Don't be so angry now, the footprints in the field are of adults, you have to call me out anyway. If Wan saw the cow, he was only 4 years old, I understand that he can't see the cow, but if it's an adult, then the cows have eaten a lot, didn't they do it on purpose?" Mrs. Hu Zhang looked at her son nervously, but when she heard what Mu Yangling said, she didn't understand, so she turned around and ran back to the house to grab Hu Gui. "Why are you so cruel? Xiaoan is your nephew, he is only 4 years old. Let him be the scapegoat, come out and speak clearly." Hearing the noise in the room, Old Man Hu's face was livid, and Hu Fang looked at Mu Yangling helplessly and said, "Aling, your third uncle definitely didn't do it on purpose, so I'll help you fill up the seedlings later. Why not, sample? How to make it up? Do you still have seedlings in your house?" This is where Mu Yangling is most angry. Now that the rice in the entire village has been planted, even if it is necessary to make up, it can't be made up. How can she not be angry? Hu Gui was pulled out by Mrs. Hu Zhang, who pushed him away in embarrassment, and said, "Xiaoan is looking after this cow. When I went there, the cow had already left the field. If I hadn't pulled it out, your 13 Mu all the paddy fields have to be eaten by it." Hu Gui gloated a little and said, "Everyone has a share in this cow. Even if we want to blame it, we can't just blame our Hu family. Why should we release this cow? Your Mu family has never offered a single grass since they took the cow." Fart, the Malu who rushed over heard the words, stepped forward and shouted, "Is the cow home for me? When I brought it back, the stone stipulated that the cows in the flag were used and released in turn. My family doesn't use cows. I gave it all to the folks, and naturally there is no need to herd the cows. Now it is your turn to be a small flag. You co-authored to bring all 5 cows to your house, and let the people below let you free them. I really thought you were a small flag. The flag is a high official, right? Maliu's family is not as good at talking as Mu Yangling, with a very loud voice, and in a short while, everyone in the village was called. Today, your Hu family said in front of all the villagers, are you paying for this rice, compensation? How to compensate? Although my Shishi is no longer Zyoki, he is now the little general's personal bodyguard, and he can't be bullied just by anyone. Hu Fang hurriedly stepped forward to grab Malu and said, my good sister, I didn't say that I won't pay, isn't this a discussion with you? What are you discussing? The rice planted in these 10 miles and 8 villages has not been planted? How are you going to compensate? The days are too far away, can the rice planted later keep up with the ones planted earlier? Who will believe that your son didn't do it on purpose? Aling, tell me, why did you come to the Hu family? My niece and granddaughter knew that if she hadn't found something, she wouldn't have called the Hu family directly. Mu Yangling looked at Hu Gui with a sullen face, and said, you said that the cow was already in the field when you went, but I saw the trace, it was you who drove the cow all the way from your field to the river. No child's footprints. Hu Gui's face changed slightly, the old man who stared at him, seeing that the Mu family was clearly looking for trouble, he said in a deep voice, then what do you think you want? The ant smiled coldly, it's not what I want, but what your Hu family wants. The folks who gathered outside to watch the fun stood on tiptoe and watched the Hu family, and some even climbed up the tree to look in. The Hu family felt their skin was on fire. Hu Jinshi leaned against the door, smiled coldly, stepped forward and pulled the frightened one to his side to stand and watch the excitement. The old man who glared at her when he saw it, thought for a while and said, I'll pay you money now that the rice has been planted, they really can't find seedlings to help Mu's family plant them. It's too late to plant them, so they can only pay money. Thinking of the silver that was knocked away by old man who last time, Malayashi was furious. She held back her breath and said, okay, you pay 17 taels of silver. What are you talking about? Why don't you go and grab it directly? The rice grown on your 13 acres of land is not worth 17 taels. Hu Gui jumped up and shouted. Old Man Hu and Hu Fang's faces were ugly, knowing that Malu's debt was for the previous wine money. Sure enough, Mrs. Malu smiled coldly and said, why is it not worth it? The rice seeds for our family are not distributed in the military camp, but the ancestral rice seeds that we took out from our own homes and burned 3 times before the funeral. The fragrance of the year, my ancestors left a message, this kind of seed is high yielding, but baby, you deliberately herded cattle and gnawed away a piece of land, it is like digging into my heart, but you only need 17 taels of silver from your family, that is still cheap. Well, at least I didn't ask you Hu family to give up the position of this little flag. Hu Jinshi threw away the melon seeds in his hand, stepped forward and said, Auntie doesn't need to get angry, my man is willing to give up the position of Zyoki. Brother Mu doesn't care about this now, but he can let the capable people in the village live there. Prodigal girls, do you have a place to talk? Get down, old man Hu yelled at her. Hu Jinshi sneered, father doesn't have to get angry with me. I didn't say this, but the head of the family. If you don't like it, then drive me and the head of the house out. You, old man Hu pointed at Hu Jinshi and was speechless. Hu Fang said, second brother, there is no place for you to talk here, let me go down. Good boy, this matter has nothing to do with you. Get down quickly. I don't care if the little flag is allowed or not. I just want them to pay me the money. Old man Hu, will you pay the money? If not, we will go to the camp to find the general manager. Flag review. Didn't the general flag listen to the little general? The little general naturally favored the Mu family.